I would encourage people to look at their strengths and capitalize on their strengths rather than focusing more on their areas of development. Because if you focus on your areas of development, it will take longer time for you to overcome those areas. But something that comes very natural to you, you'll excel at a much faster pace in professional as well as personal life. I say to everyone who I meet, these small things will happen, small dejections here and there, but your personality or you being a human is way more superior than anything put together.
You're listening to the East Meets West Pakistani Professional Journeys podcast, released bi-weekly every Sunday at 5 p.m. on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple iTunes. Welcome to the East Meets West Pakistani Professional Journeys podcast. Today we have Ahsan Qureshi. Ahsan has extensive educational background, such as an MBA from the University of Leicestershire in the UK and a PhD in Business and Management from the University of Salford in the UK. Ahsan has worked in companies such as Deloitte, GE, Metier, and now Confidential as an interim HR director. We can kick things off. Do you mind just talking about your time in Pakistan?
Oh, for sure. My time in Pakistan, I was born and raised in Karachi, did my schooling from Karachi, did my bachelor's in Karachi, started my very first job, of course, in Karachi with the HSBC Bank way back, good old days, and progressed my way through initial ranks within HSBC. I started as management trainee and then moved on becoming HR manager before immigrating to Canada. That's another interesting story, how I moved and came about to Canada. I still remember my office was located Ayah Chundriga Road in Karachi. Shaheen Complex was the landmark building. We were located on the ground floor of Shaheen Complex. Amazing times.
I assume it would in terms of just like reflecting back, but is there any other like experiences you would like to share in terms of any food places that if you went
Oh,
to?
for sure. Being a Karachiite, you cannot, it's incomplete if you have not been to Boat Basin. That was the old times when what Clifton used to be. Going to Buddu Khan, the original Buddu Khan for kebab parathas, kebab rolls, Silver Spoon, very, very earlier days in at Tariq Road. So those, and then in defense, there was a famous market called, at that time, it used to be called the Khadda market in phase 5, where they have a number of food outlets. But that's the dahi baras and chaat. And again, oh my God, I want to go back. I want to go back and start eating again.
Yeah. So I guess when was your first thought when you said, okay, I'm considering going to the West, in terms of when did that first come in? Was it after university or during your job or someone mentioned it? Like, how was that exposed to you?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. I never planned to be in Canada. That was my time at HSBC, late 90s. And some of my friends were immigrating to Canada at that time. The Canadian immigration was not taking place from Islamabad or Dubai. Hong Kong or US were the immigration centers.
Yep.
So a friend of mine was applying and he asked me, do you want to apply? I said, no, I never thought about it. So he filled out all my forms and all that. He just asked me to sign and he applied. I gave him the document, whatever was needed. But I was never interested because I said, you know what, I'm going to apply. The usual turnaround time to get landing papers was around 5 to 6 years back then. So even if something comes back, you will think about it after 5-6 years. Interestingly enough, back then I used to travel a little bit for my work. So I'd been to US during those times, and I had US visa on my passport. So one of the things that my friend asked me that I'm just going to put Buffalo as your immigration center. So if they call you for an interview, you can simply go there. I said, yeah. If and when they call me, we'll think about it back then. My whole process back then in late 90s took less than 7 months.
Oh, wow.
From my application to me getting landing papers in my hands. They just asked me to do the medical, send them the medical records, and my landing papers came. It's interesting because whatever is in your fate, it happened, and it happens for a reason. I got to see different parts of the world. I got to see a beautiful country here. I was able to have my family here. So all great learning and good life experiences throughout.
Yeah, it's a good friend. Was Canada the first country you landed, or was it straight Pakistan to Canada?
For immigration purposes,
Yeah.
yeah, immigration was not even in my plans. I used to make fun of people who were applying. I said, yeah, are you crazy? It's so cold. How are you going to live there and all that? Nature has its beautiful ways of showing things back. You say, hey, you used to say this. Now you're in the same boat. But I'm happy it happened.
And do you recall any research you did before you landed in Canada in terms of job applications and other factors? Months
So
or
a
years?
couple of things I would say. So even
Right.
if you have to
Something
call
interesting.
someone back then, it was not as simple as me and you chatting over the net. I did reach out to a number of firms because I was working in a bank. I reached out to a number of banks and I got a reference letter from my original bank where I was, in HSBC. The thing was that, yeah, when you come here, reach out to us and then we see what we can do. I would say do your research, structure it in that way. I did do my research in terms of how the Canadian market is. Would it be easy or would it be difficult? What are some of the challenges that I might face? Of course, culture, the weather was a big thing. And now we don't get that kind of weather, harsh weather, the way it used to be in 2000 and 2001. But having said that, that was the research. Whoever you can contact through your networks. LinkedIn wasn't there. You're
See.
just writing emails and getting email responses and getting all the recruiting agencies and headhunters lined up. So did that part of homework and due diligence, but did not have anything in hand to land a job.
Yeah. A lot of people, what happens is once they land in any country in the West, right, like US, Canada, I would say like the first 6 months to 1 year, a lot of people end up actually heading back. So, how are you able to, especially when you're in a new environment, how are you able to adapt and then excel in terms of your career in the West? How was that process like for you?
I think a couple of things. You need to have a nice support system built around yourself. And again, this is even more crazier because I did not know anybody in Canada.
Right.
I had no family. I only had one friend who I met 3 months prior to me landing in Canada. So I took a risk and I said, you know what? I'll go and live in a hotel for a few months, find a job, and then do something. So I was blessed in the sense that this friend of mine, he was living with his uncle at that time. He also just landed. He
Yeah.
didn't have a job. And he said, look, I spoke with my uncle and you can stay with me for one night. So I'll pick you from the airport. You'll stay here and then we'll find something, or you need to find your own way around. Because he
Yeah.
was also new, right?
Right.
And so I'm really thankful to him and his uncle, though. So they allowed me to stay at their place for one night. So I stayed there. I still remember the morning. It was true. I was totally jet lagged. The flight was like, it landed 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. It was a bit windy and chilly. I met his uncle in the morning at breakfast. He said, why don't you stay for a couple of more days and see how things go? So yeah, that was one of the other parts.
So, in terms of landing the job of the field that you're actually in right now,
Absolutely
yeah.
awesome. It was extremely challenging. Some of my friends were coming in after I landed and they were landing jobs directly. They were getting the job offers and joining the very next day. It took me a little while. I did not get directly into it. Initially, I did some odd jobs because that's what you had to do to
Yeah.
survive back then. So I kept applying. I kept reaching out to headhunters and recruitment agencies. I kept knocking the door, didn't get dejected or demotivated. Man, I got a small break. I got a very junior position at a bank. I did that. It was not in my field. So this is another thing. In whichever field you are, you will face that challenge that you will be given the excuses like you don't have Canadian experience, overqualified because you were working at a very senior position or a mid-level, mid to senior level position, and people don't understand. And you need to understand and adopt based on what their needs are. So it took a little while. I kept applying. So I kept one full-time job that I needed to go in the morning and come in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Same time I was reaching out and continuously looking for opportunities within my field. Got a mortgage underwriter's position with the General Electric back then. And it was like early 2000. And after a year's time, this was around 2003 and 4. Prior to that, I was working as a personal banker with some other multiple institutions like CIBC, HSBC, Bank of Montreal in junior capacity. But when I got my break into GE, in their mortgage insurance underwriting business. They had an opening of an HR manager in Calgary. So I applied and I got the job. I was interviewed. I went through it. And in early four, I moved to Calgary with my wife and one daughter. My daughter was only 6 months old when we moved. So that's one of the things that I kept open, relocation and meeting up. It's all even interesting. I remember in 2001 specific event, September 11th, unfortunately took place.
Yeah.
I still remember I was downtown in Toronto in HSBC's building, waiting for my interview, and everything was just like shut down, and everyone went back home, and it was a scary situation back then. So that's how I landed my initial part-time roles and into GE. So it took me, I would say, good 2 years to land a job that was HR related.
You briefly talked about what motivated you to continue pushing. Like, you must have had some thoughts that, oh, maybe I should go back to Pakistan because, I have experience there. How did you not go back and say, I'm going to get through this?
Yeah, I believe I understand where your question is coming from, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
So back then, you're talking about 20 years behind, right? So you're looking at early 2000s. Opportunities were there. Economy was booming. Alberta was booming big time because of oil sands and all that. So and that was the opportunity that I got pulled into HR at that time. So I moved to Calgary as HR manager for Western Canada in one of GE businesses. And at that point in time, I never thought going back because that thought never crossed my mind. I'll come here, settling in for a better future and stuff like that. So that it stayed that way. I did not deter from that. Good or wrong, was it the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? I don't know, because this is how it happened to me. For different individuals, it would be different. However, the people who are moving in now, I do see this trend a lot. I do consulting part-time with some confidential organizations in around the US and Canada. You probably heard the word Great Resignation in North America.
Yeah.
So the great people are leaving organizations because post-COVID, they are focusing on their personal lives rather than being extremely loyal to corporate world, because that's in my area of expertise in performance management. So that was one of the key things. One of the things that I did earlier on, I should have mentioned, was when I came to Canada, I never gave up studying new things.
Right.
So even though I had enough experience, I came in with 10 years of experience with education and all that. I remember reluctantly initially, but I did do my postgraduate diploma from Humber College in Human Resources. It was good for me to build networking, understand the Canadian landscape and so forth. Agree or we can agree to disagree, but it gives you that understanding of knowing people differently, understanding and looking at things from different perspective. An important aspect definitely is continuous improvement. You need to keep learning. You need to keep acquiring skills, new education, new tools. I'm a firm believer in continuous advancement. My PhD was while I was working. It's not mentioned on my LinkedIn profile, but I also hold a MA in international relations from Pakistan. And that has actually helped me also in terms of understanding different cultures, perspectives, organizations, psychology, philosophy, and so forth.
Awesome. And in terms of the job that propelled you forward in terms of your career in Canada, so what career really pushed you forward in your...
I would always be indebted to GE because General Electric gave me the opportunity to get back into human resources. I feel really blessed and lucky that I got that break. And the human resource practices and processes in GE are best in class. Every organization in the world, even today, GE has gone through massive transformation recently. However, the processes, procedures, the leadership development focus on people, understanding people as a key development asset for our organization during Jack Welch's time and moving on even up to now. That organization has immense influence in building my human capital capabilities to fit the 21st century. When I moved from Mississauga to Calgary, it was with GE. I was looking after one of the businesses, supporting my HR directors there, business leaders in different areas of people development, talent management, succession planning. I enjoyed that part. They actually moved me over and they transferred me to Edmonton. They loved me so much. They said, we want you to feel the actual Canadian weather, Calgary. Yeah. So yeah, that was great learning experience during my times at GE.
Okay. So for people who don't know, like obviously HR people associate that with hiring people, but is there aspects in HR that you've got, like the experience you've gone through that people might not be aware in terms of what's in the field?
Look, HR is not about hiring or firing. Right? HR is about developing human capabilities to meet organizations' strategic objectives. Without people, you cannot deliver on your customer commitments. And again, I quote Jack Welch in one of his interviews. He mentioned that if you own Yankees, who would you like to spend more time with as an owner of Yankee? Would you be spending more time with the players of Yankees or people who fund Yankees? The CFO or the coach? Who would you spend more time with as an owner? So his answer was, I would spend more and more time with my players and people. Finance is okay, but if I don't know my people and I don't know which team member is going to play which role, I'm never going to succeed. So a human rep capital is about developing people with their current skill sets, capabilities, competencies, and putting them as a competitive advantage for yourself and for their development. You cannot achieve corporate strategy without having right people in the right places and in the right spot with right capabilities and skills. No matter which company you are running, whether you're running Airbus, Boeing, Lockheed, Sikorsky, GE, IBM, Microsoft, Google, they all focus on people development. The more you focus on people development, recruitment and payroll have now been outsourced. They are
That's
not even part of main core offerings of an HR function within good organizations. They are just outsourced to third parties because they are not
yeah.
considered as important as focusing on succession competency and competitive development of people.
So when you say the development of individuals, is that mostly just promotions or is it actual team building or what's the core, like in general, obviously not any specific within the companies?
Yeah. So basically, if you look at people development, when you hire someone, in general, electric use the term wing to wing basically is from one end of the wing to the other end of the wing and everything in between. Wing to wing approach is the moment somebody is hired till the moment he retires or leaves the company. Everything in between is managed from a people development perspective. The kind of skills required for him or her to be successful in that role. What are some potential roles that individual can do? How are your capabilities fit with the wider context of the organization? What I need to do to get to next level and to the next level and to the next level? How do I keep learning new skills and acquiring new skills to further grow, not just myself, but also the business? Because if you as an individual within an organization is not growing, if you are not growing, your organization is also not growing. So you need to grow to enable the organization to grow or department to grow. So the way I look at people development is when you have a newborn child, you bring the child into the world and then you take them through different stages, teach them, feed them different pieces of information, food, and so forth. And you take them from baby steps up to they go to start college, going to colleges, universities in their own lives and start doing that.
Right.
Learning and development is a key part. Compensation is a key part. Employee engagement. I need to be happy. So when I wake up on Monday morning, I need to be energized enough to go to work rather than, oh
right.
my God, another Monday I have to go and see my boss. It should be like, yeah, I'm going to be contributing something to myself and to my organization.
So you must have come across several individuals that have been successful in climbing the corporate ladder or being successful in their roles. Were there any key traits you came across in these individuals that stood out as they progressed or you came across in your career that you've seen it multiple times at this point that you're like, okay, this is some key identifiers?
Full of passion and energy. They
Okay.
bring in positivity. When they walk into the office or they walk into the room, you can feel their presence. They don't speak a lot, but when they speak well, the energy, the positivity, eagerness to learn new things and be adaptable to change. Those 3, 4 skills are way more important than they were 15, 20 years ago. Now, we have seen massive explosion of, and
Yeah.
then
Mhm.
Twitter, imagine life without being on LinkedIn from a professional perspective or sharing your thoughts on social media. Now it gets further exciting with generative
Yeah.
AI. Is the chatbot going to replace your role, my role? Maybe today you're talking to me, tomorrow I might be talking to a robot. So you need to be adaptable and never stop learning, making sure that you are in command of your life and your career rather than someone else telling you what to do. You take control and you tell the organization, look, I love you, but I don't want to stay with you any longer. I want to move on.
So, in terms of individuals that want to break into the HR field, do you have any advice for a person who is trying to get in and might be struggling or just trying to get their first foot in the door?
I would go back to understand the local dynamic network, the way we connected, me and you connected. And I
Right.
connected to a lot of other followers on LinkedIn and Facebook and through other social connections is building the network. Do not give up. Stay positive. You might not land exactly the job you want to, but good things will happen. You need to keep trying. Find
Yeah.
your niche. Now there are so many opportunities out there with technological advancement. Maybe you were working 15 years in HR or finance. Now maybe you don't need to work in finance or HR. You maybe switch your niche to somewhere else. If you want to stay in HR, that's fine. If you want to move on to another profession or do something different, what keeps you and what makes you happy is totally different. I want to do what would fit my schedule rather than I need to fit up according to other schedules. You get life once. The
Right.
time you spend with yourself, with your family, is never going to come back. You need to decide whether you're going to give 5 hours of your life every day to corporate world, or you're going to give those 5 hours to people who you love. So that's a decision you need to make. Where do you draw the line between work-life balance? Are you willing to work like to 24/7, or are you going to draw the line at 5? That's something that Gen X, Gen Y, millennials, they are way more tuned with that. They think, okay, I'm going to work according to them. They would want to go and work in an organization that fits their schedule and their plan, not the
Right.
other way around.
In terms of the cultural traits that you've brought from Pakistan and maintained in Canada, is there any cultural aspects that you've maintained in the West?
Yeah, definitely, Azam. You are who you are, right?
Yeah.
No matter how Western you try to become, you
Yeah.
are who you are. You will be discriminated. You will feel isolated at some times. But again, staying positive, being honest and honest to yourself and honest to people around you. Don't make things up. Just be who you are.
Right.
Stick to your principles. And that's something I learned at my schools and colleges, at my home, is be loyal. And as we call it in our culture, you're earning a halal income. You get rewarded for how much you've put in. So keeping that mindset is extremely important, bringing that positivity. And people coming from Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, they
Yeah.
all are extremely hardworking. And
Right.
maybe even hardworking than you and me and a lot of people put around us together. And I believe we owe a responsibility to sharing our understanding with them and helping newcomers settle in whichever part of the world they want to go, whatever they
Yeah.
want to do, because your act of kindness will be returned to you with much more rewards.
Right.
I'll share with you a small story. When I came back, so I immigrated back to Canada during COVID. I was in Calgary till early 2009. Then, due to some situations, I had to leave Canada. So I went to Pakistan. I was fortunate that I resigned from GE and went to Middle East. I was lucky there. I got to work with one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world in Abu Dhabi. I learned newer skills and newer things in terms of mergers and acquisitions, in terms of change management, in terms of asset management, in terms of buying and selling organizations, restructuring, right sizing. All the stuff that I did with those firms was based on my learnings at HSBC and GE. So I kept learning newer things from one organization to another. Keeping that positivity is extremely important.
Awesome. So I guess you've talked to so many different aspects, like from your experience in Pakistan, going to Canada, and then heading back to Pakistan, and then coming back to Canada, and then all the experiences that you got from that. How do you define success for
I
you?
would say success is what you are happy with. Do not be afraid of change. Do not be afraid of trying new things. And that is something which I have acquired and learned over the years. I never thought that I would go and work in Middle East. after moving to Canada. It just happened. Someone approached me in 2007 on LinkedIn when LinkedIn was not popular. They offered me a job in Abu Dhabi. They were impressed with my experience at HSBC and big names like GE. They offered me a job. I took the job and risk and went there. My kids were young at that time. I stayed in Middle East for almost 10 years and never again thought that I would take another risk of going back to Pakistan. And guess what? I got a CHRO role or opening in Lahore. And I went to Lahore and stayed there for 4 years. I have never worked in Lahore. I have never lived in Lahore. But we took the chance. Kids were getting close to university age. Let's go and be close to our culture a bit. And then we move back when kids are going to be close to universities.
Yeah.
Then COVID hit. And I lost my job because of restructuring and all that stuff. We packed our bags, then we moved back. And when we were moving back, I did not have a job here. So again, my wife's support was there. She said, let's fine, let's go back and try and settle back there, whatever comes our way. We took the risk, came back, bought a house, got them admitted to schools, high schools. Now both have started university. My older one started university last year and younger one is going to start this year in September. So yeah, it all worked out. It worked out. We did not plan any of it. Some of it was in my mind, but whatever opportunity came, I looked at it. I looked at the positives and negatives, and I left the rest of it to God and took the decision with good faith. And that's how it happened. With my experience as a senior VP in human capital, locally as well as in global organizations, you try and adapt to those challenges, keeping yourself positive, learning newer things, keeping yourself updated. I did my PhD while I was working. I did my MBA while I was working. Be open to change, because if you don't change, change is going to change you.
Right.
So I think staying positive, having faith will take you a long way. People who are coming new to Canada or US or to UK, find your sweet spots. Understand what your capabilities are. Do a due diligence on yourself. I'm good at this. I'm not so good at that. I would encourage people to look at their strengths and capitalize on their strengths rather than focusing more on their areas of development. Because if you focus on your areas of development, it will take longer time for you to overcome those areas. But something that comes very natural to you, you'll excel at a much faster pace in professional as well as personal life.
Now, what I really like is just your positivity. You can just say it throughout this entire interview in terms of the way you went through your process. You always look at it as a positive area.
Or to be honest with you, also those negative thoughts come to your mind even today.
Yeah.
They do come to my mind even today. I will say to my students, I say to everyone who I meet, these small things will happen, small dejections here and there, but your personality or you being a human is way more superior than anything put together.
But Ahsan, thank you so much. You talked about so many areas.
Appreciate it. And again, just before we sign off, staying positive, having positive people around you, reach out. Don't be afraid of reaching out to people.